Parkway. You thought it was over. We went back in the timeline to day one. This is the alleged beginning of the construction of it. It all starts here. Somehow ends up here. You just look at the roads, if you can even call it that. What the hell's going on there? But here you've got your beginning. It's like a steam shovel. Maybe it's a little later in the game for that. But this is allegedly the beginning of the parkway. It looks like back there's already a bridge. So what gives? Time on these pictures. This one is a historic photograph looking west from the 1 mile east of the New York state line. 1938. No, it can't be. 1939. Still riding horses in 1939, huh? And then somehow, also 1939, and no horses. Something must be wrong with that date. This is from 1955 here. The Greenwich Toll Plaza. At least a giant shiny quarter. Can I keep it? This is 1940. So happy to pay your toll, aren't you? Yeah, well, you'll be happy in a few years. And here is the scenic and really lovely Merritt Parkway. Man, what a time to be alive. I would love to. Doesn't that just look peaceful? We're just going to take a little cruise here. Why in the world did we destroy this amazing place? Look at just how serene. What the hell happened? I haven't been to this part of the country, but I guarantee you it doesn't look like that. This looks just gorgeous. These pictures are from 1940s, pre-World War T, and even that, this insane traffic intersection looks more like a meandering scenic stroll. What a shame. Look how clean and just... I would love if every car could... I think common vehicles should just max out at 45 miles an hour. You want to end traffic fatalities. Maybe I'm in the minority on this, but I would absolutely choose for every vehicle to max out at 45 miles per hour rather than lose the amount of people that I've known to have been lost to traffic fatalities, usually from some speeding jackass. 45 miles per hour, you would cut the number of fatalities out. You might still have a random few, but there wouldn't be many. And I'd be okay with that, personally. I feel like all the areas that they should be writing laws, things like that, to actually protect us, they don't. They do dipshit stuff like, now your car won't run unless your seatbelt's buckled in. Like, that's some new regulation that's been put in cars, allegedly. That's ridiculous. So you can't get out of your vehicle and listen to the sound of your engine, or you can't get out of your vehicle and go around and open the trunk, or whatever it is you have to turn. Like, how ridiculous is that? Just to force people to buckle up. If that's your method of actually trying to stop fatalities, then that is absolutely misguided thinking. And so all those people that have their engines that start remotely, well, that's a useless feature in the advent of this legislation. It's things like that. Unless you're going to actually save lives, quit writing laws. No one cares. It's control freaks. Spent way too much time on this roadway, but it is really nice seeing these old pictures and these classy cars. What a time to be alive. Really was. I'm heartbroken looking at it now. I can't imagine being alive and then also being alive now. Must be like, yeesh. Oh, what a crying shame. Look at some of these bridges, too. some of these had to have been here in existence. Like, what is this? Look at this old world. What? Some of these are just too cool. 70 bridges they built for this? I don't know about all that. Some of them just look way too embedded. Like they kind of made use of an old, what it seems like to me. Look at that thing. That's a really, really sharp looking bridge. You may think I'm going through these too slowly, spending too much time on these bridges, but the actual reality of it, each bridge has its own documentation and write-up. Each bridge is actually its own feature. I'm actually not going through them bit by bit like I could. For example, this bridge here, Lake Avenue. Lake Avenue is a link between agricultural regions to the north and the market at Greenwich. Designed to be a grade crossing, but the state offered to build an underpass, but the Greenwich Press reported agitation for the improvement began last year. The town would eliminate all grade crossings, the state would build a bridge over the parkway. After much hubbub and ballyhoo, it was finally agreed to at a town meeting. I didn't add any of that. This is a double-span deck bridge. The center legs are 3 feet deep, made from steel welded sections in reinforced concrete footings. Also, large rocks placed in freshly poured concrete, acting as a sub-foundation. An eclectic design, we're told. Random ashlar masonry blended in, malleable cast iron framework for those grills and panels, which you're seeing there. It's a white cast iron that's heated for a period of time to relieve the internal stresses that are produced during the shaping. The grapevine grills on the legs, these ones here, were cast in a sertrock pattern, similar to like a plaster of Paris, for strength, for hardness. They're all welded to the frames. Those urn panels here above the grills and these little mini rosettes here, hard to tell, are the washers for the bolts. What an amazing design, really. Stratford, a little bit different. It doesn't have the concrete pylons, and it's rather stripped of ornamentation. This is the one on Riversville Road. This road begins in Glenville, proceeds north through the community of Riversville to the New York state line. Along with the parkway, the river flows underneath this bridge. It took about 6 months to make, allegedly. By now, it looks entirely different. It had to be completely extensively rehabilitated 40 years later. This is a double-span composite beam bridge, which I'm sure you knew. Thick reinforced I-beams. There used to be a sidewalk along the riverside, sort of cantilevered from the center pier, but it's gone. And the iron bridge rail is also gone. Simply detailed, with a handrail that was poured in place. These wide recesses, these recesses here, give the appearance of balusters. And it says 1936 in the face of one of the walls. This is the Lapham Avenue Bridge. Hard to imagine that all 35 overpasses, 25 underpasses, 16 bridges, and 3 railroad bridges said to have been designed by George Dunkelberger of the Henry Hobson Richardson tradition. I found that hard to believe. This bridge here services local roads in the Talmadge Hill section of New Canaan, upper middle class homes in a rural suburban setting. Built in 1937, designed by George Dunkelberger, Mr. Dunkelberger. Those rails up there are open concrete. It's built on hard pan and rolled gravel. Didn't last very long. 23 years later, they had to take out massive damaged sections and spray new material on. That's not very long. Unless, of course, it was here a lot longer than that, and they're just, telling us this. I don't know. I could go either way on it, really, I can. Whether these were half dug up, or whether they were partially there, or not there at all, and they used old world inspiration, I don't know. It's hard to tell from these little bits and spurts of data, but I do find that some of the narrative, the Dunkelberger guy designing all these, to be ridiculous. What is this? Some of these just seem to be too embedded in the earth for this to be as new as they say. Either that or the material is just shoddier than hail. And it is kind of cool that they're all different. This is the Wire Mill Road Bridge, part of the same parkway. A single-span reinforced concrete barrel-type rigid frame bridge with sloping, curving, reinforced concrete wing wall. You get these construction photos like this. This is allegedly this bridge being constructed, this one we're just looking at. And I see all the lumber just dumped here, which is, I don't understand that. I've never seen a construction site that does that. But okay, let's say that that's real. This, in my brain, from what I understand, would only be used for scaffolding and for, not even for framing, except maybe to hold the concrete in place if they poured it, and then to remove it. If that's my understanding is correct. So I don't understand why there's always so much of it. That's what leads in a lot of these pictures us to believe that some of this stuff is fake. And not only that, but so this is the finished product of this. This is what they're claiming. And they're claiming that it only took 5 months to make, from July 2nd, 1937 to January 2nd, 1938. So 5 months for this particular bridge to be created. And, this makes no sense. So this is saying that the Wire Mill Bridge here was constructed.
Construction complete.
They are saying that the bridge was constructed from July 2nd, 1937 to January 2nd, 1938.
Construction complete.
Here, we have these photographs here, which are dated 1935.
Construction complete.
It took 2 years and 6 months to build. Why would they claim otherwise? Unless something's wrong with the narrative.
Construction complete.
It took 6 months to build this in 1937. These photos are dated 1935. Wire Mill Road Bridge under construction.
Complete.
Got the wrong bridge, so I dive into my substantial library about construction.
Complete.
And of course, if I'm wrong, or if anyone has any insight, please let me know. Actually, truly curious about this. Why there would be so much wood or lumber. In this book here, the Masonry Construction Manual, wood is only mentioned as a use for windows, framing, doors, planks for cladding, shutters, etc., none of which are applicable to a bridge. Here, in railway masonry and bridge foundations, which is actually more timeline appropriate, wood is only mentioned 8 times. One in here was used as a wood auger. Here, when it's talked about using wood ashes. Here, when it's talking about the dangers of driftwood. And here, when talking about the inferiority of wooden bridges. The word lumber is not mentioned once in the entire document. And in Concrete and Pavement Design Manual, wood is only mentioned a method to create a curved frame, a mold, basically, within which, or a form within which to pour concrete to take its shape. So I guess my original point is, what is all that wood doing there, piled up, if that's an actual construction photo? And you couple that with the erroneous date, and it just casts the whole thing in a little light of what I would call dubious nature. I know that was a lot of effort to simply arrive at the same place where we began, but still. Now, I see that they're using it for scaffolding and framing. I just don't understand why they can pile it up like that. Like, all the construction sites I've been to have never seen this sort of level of just chaos. Anyway, moving on. In what's become known as the Great Bridge Work, had I known bridges would be filling the content, this is the Guinea Road Bridge. Construction from May to 1937 to the fall of that same year. Reinforced concrete arch with a rustic styling. All the rubble or masonry in the bridge is made from cement. They claim they piled boulders around the base of the arch so the bridge appears to spring from natural rock. The construction drawings show the coat of arms displayed on the inside of the pylons, but it does not appear to be anyone on the bridge. This is allegedly based off a picture of a bridge in Borrowdale, England. Dunkelberger used as a model. This bridge at the time of this writing has never needed maintenance. How about that? Here again you have construction photos that look fucking retarded. See, this one looks nice and neat. This is rebar. This makes sense. This one, I don't know. Are these of the same bridge? How could these be of the same bridge? They look nothing alike. This one's got the curved rebar. This one I don't see it. I feel like they got the captions of these photos really wrong. Because allegedly what we are looking at is 3 historic photographs that show the scaffolding and reinforcing bars. And these photographs are showing the stonework being laid. I hate to be such a skeptic about everything, but I just don't understand. This one actually kind of looks modern compared to some of the other ones. In any case, that's what we're told. This is the Long Ridge Road. That's right. Yeah. Tired of bridges yet?
Approaching.
Took 6 months to build, of course. They were miracle workers back then. Reinforced concrete, Rippewam River Bridge. Reinforced concrete with rock-faced masonry, Rocky Hill Road Bridge. Originally erected for a branch line on the railroad. In 1939, however, the commission granted permission to abandon that part of the rail line. So criticism arose because of its $50,000 cost and the fact that it has never been used. Never really, as of the 80s, never really needed any maintenance. Perhaps because it was never used. I don't know. Looks kind of cool, though. I guess they just go under that one. This one, I don't know. I can't make out the number. But I do like the fact that this tire is floating in the river. I think that adds a very Connecticut look to it. Very distinct. Look how cool that is. Man, that is overgrown. I love that. I wish I knew more about this one. But of course, I don't. And looks like they really struggled to get this guy just took this picture while driving on it or something. Oh, terrible picture. That drawing's not confusing. This one was 1936, the Perry Avenue Bridge, receiving little maintenance since it was built. Actually, this isn't the Perry Avenue Bridge. Who cares? Finally breaking free of the bridge chains which held us so bound. Dr. William M. Curtis, or more importantly, his house. That's what we're feasting our eyes upon now. This eclectic detailing, this rather glorious Queen Anne-style house. We're told that the inside has lost all of its historic fabric. But the outside, however, the outside. Built in 1905 for Dr. William Curtis, a physician who kept his practice in the house, as well as living in it with his small family, wife, daughter, and mother-in-law. Use as an office and residence, which accounts for the 2 entries to the house. This man was born in Bristol to English-born parents who were 25 when he married Guinevere Pierce. In 1896, started his career as a general practitioner, lived in rented quarters nearby. His ability to build this large, stylish residence attests to the success of his practice. This is right down the way from Federal Hill, the neighborhood occupied by the city's wealthiest residents at the turn of the century. And this house is 2 doors down from the classical revival-style free public library. Meanwhile, those houses have been destroyed to make a parking lot, and now this house did not. Now, this man died in 1914, so really only enjoyed this place for 9 years. And how about that? So he only lived to be 49. Not even, he lived to be 45. He died at age 45, actually. It's really interesting, the doctor. The family sold the house to another physician, Albert Dewey, who lived and practiced in the house until his death in 1937. And now it's used as a multi-family dwelling. You know, they say the inside has lost all historical integrity. How in the world can they say that? My God, look at these wood beams. This thing is gorgeous. Unbelievable. These old houses have just such incredible style. It's hard to believe that they were residences. I mean, it almost feels like I don't know. I don't even know. Oh, the old corner cabinet. Connecticut's very particular to those. You have to comment on it or they'll be very insulted. I've learned this. Surveys have taught me much. And a very, very interesting place here. The Farley Company Real Estate Building. Well, that's what it says there. But actually, it's known as the Corning Building. And actually, its architect was Lester B. Scheid. Architect Lester B. S. Scheid? Scheid, I don't know. Attended Yale, and the Corning family home stood on this site from 1854 to 1934. The estate demolished the home to develop the property. So really, since 1976, the Farley Company's been here, temporarily vacated the premises, but will move back to the new building to be constructed on the site as soon as possible. Oh, I see, because it's about to be destroyed. Well, fuck you, Farley family, Farley Company. Whatever. Now, we are told that a thorough search of the State of Connecticut Library, Hartford Collection, the Hartford Public Library Photo Collection, the Connecticut Historical Society, and the Hartford Newspaper Photo Morgue, that's interesting, have produced no historical photograph of this building or general area. So we're going on reckless speculation based on one interview with Elizabeth J. McKenzie, who was interviewed in 1984. So, likely sources not investigated, none known. Supplemental material, none. The only reason this is even on here is because in 1985, the structures from this and on were to be demolished to make way for a new office building for the Farley Company. A federal agency involved is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, involved because one of the buildings to be demolished is the Mechanics Savings Bank building, and the Mechanics Savings Bank will occupy space in the new structure. Look at this fucking gorgeous building's about to be destroyed. I mean, this is an unflattering angle. There you go, that's better. Look at that dubious foundation. Look at that old world wonder. Getting rid of this one, eh? What else? What else are you getting rid of? You fucking jerks. Oh, come on. Look at that thing. It's unbelievable. For shame. And this is in the 80s? They demolished that thing? That is terrible. We've moved across the street. What bastards. Look at these little rosettes. Last little things remaining. What was probably an insanely decorated... Yeah, look at this. What a disgrace. This is the old view. The financial section of Hartford. Oh, sure. This is an architect's drawing of the new building to be erected. Really? That's a drawing? So are those drawings too? Those photographs of people? Those are drawings? Bullshit. Thing's already there. Look at that building. Look at that. That's ridiculous. Unbelievable that they would just destroy this thing. Look at those coffered ceilings. What a sad state of affairs. This is another commercial building that, built by Edward Brady. Red brick Italianate house, of which there were many in Hartford, it says. There were many. Brick-bearing walls. The first floor of the house has been removed. The second floor is not accessible. The front part has restaurant fixtures in it. The building is vacant. Had the interior conditions been known at the time of preparation of the National Register nomination, the structure would not have been designated as contributing. But it was. So here we are. Yeesh. Smashed out windows and trashed out everything. Way to go. Way to take care of your heritage. Man, this is where Connecticut all goes wrong. This is on Main Street, this here house. Almost the same as my generic address I give out to throw people off track. 555 West Main Street. This one's 535 West Main Street. East Hartford. Potential historic district, built in 1900, and really that's all we're told about it. So, no one lives in it. If they do, well, they don't like sunlight. Might be a Dracula living there. I don't know. I'd go knock on the door if I could. You know, if anyone watching this, you live in the area, why don't you let me know if there's a Dracula living there? We'd really love to know. We really would. I think I speak for everybody. Clearly a basement there. What else can we see? Yep, that's exactly the type of stairs that a Dracula would have. My vote is Dracula. Oh, they did get inside. So did someone else, apparently. Someone's keeping warm. That's exactly what a Dracula would do. Things being pilfered, plundered, purloined. They even took up half the linoleum. They left the toilet cover, though. Those are out of fashion. That's an insult to whoever bought that toilet cover. You stole the fucking asbestos linoleum, but you wouldn't steal the comforting, warm toilet cover. The kind that gives you cuddly toilet vibe at Grandma's house, huh? I swear, people today, no respect. Grandma's cuddly toilet deserves better. We all deserve better. 704 Park Street, that's what we're looking at here. This is a commercial building, whatever it is. That one. And we're told, in a break from the norm, we're actually given some information about this. We're told this is a brick house. The first floor has been removed. Wait, this is the same one? No, this is different. This one is Farmington Avenue House. That's better. This one's made of rusted cobblestone foundations, Chinese Chippendale balustrade, leaded glass windows, the wraparound front porch, and really, a nice ingle nook here next to the front door, and this gorgeous Palladian window. Nothing further about this one, Your Honor. Another bridge? No, I refuse. We're done here. Don't tell me we're going back to Merritt Parkway. Here we are coming into the seedy part of town.
This is where you're likely to get snatched up by an old crone, end up spending the night in a haunted graveyard surrounded by ghouls.
Or just right here at the Greenwich, at the Grosvenor, or right here at this here tenement, which is an important part of the corporate village. Existed here, textile producer, building mills, 1804, 1912, subsidized construction of churches and social halls, and so on and so forth. And this was only one of the 5 that remain. Rigid, unornamented, corporate frame type structure, mostly unappealing, entirely unappealing. Verdict, to be demolished. Although they say it was built in the mid 1880s, no one truly knows. Here we find ourselves back at the Exchange Building again. Reasons unknown. Wowie wowie. Look at that handsome mamba-jamba. What is going on there? That is the First Church of Christ, designed by Ethiel Town, from a design supplied by architect Asher Benjamin. Where have we heard that? They claim that until 1818, when Center Church became solely a church and town meetings were held elsewhere, this played an important part in the city. At that time, the historic events and persons connected to it have been numerous. State and memorial services for Abraham Lincoln and other presidents, things like that. It's a beautiful church, glorious white spire. See, it's been there since 1814. Center Church of this old town. Center something. Throughout the years, not only those who worshipped in it have cherished their ancient structure, it says here, but all citizens of New Haven have been proud of it, most admired and venerated public building. Time has been kind to her, looks as it did in the beginning. The interior's been modified a few times, but we won't get into all that. They claim in 1812 that members of the First Ecclesiastical Society of New Haven decided the old brick meeting house erected in 1757 and the third on this site was too small and old-fashioned, so they decided to build a new. Such a decision, we are told, strikes us as rather surprising, since New Haven at this time was suffering heavily from President Jefferson embargo. It would be a surprising time to build something like this, agreed, which all commerce, France, and England were prohibited. Little trade in and out of the port, and business was seriously crippled. Also, the War of 1812 had just begun. However, partly the result of the war and partly the French Revolution, a religious apathy was being replaced by a wave of enthusiasm. Once more filled the meeting houses, and within a year or two, three largest churches in New Haven, First Church, United Church, and Trinity Church, all decided to build a new house same time. Wow, that's the best story you can come up with, huh? So on November 1812, 7 members of the First Ecclesiastical Society offered to assume responsibility for erecting a new meeting house at their own expense, paid for by selling pews. Pews? From what? And salvaging material from the old house. An unusual plan. Yeah, because you need new pews. Kind of a lateral move there. The first problem was to locate the new building. That's interesting. Not built yet, how can you locate it? The next task was to find an architect and builder, you think? And so Mr. I-Town, got to work on it, along with the late Mr. J. Frederick Kelly, the distinguished authority on New England churches, you remember. There were complications, of course. The War of 1812 meant that a British squadron was blockading the coast. Huge timbers needed were no longer to be found, the forest near New Haven, and so they'd be floated down the Connecticut River from further north. This required bringing them down the Sound and through the blockade. The British courteously assented to it, saying it was not making war on religion. They even have a story for how they built this spire. They claim that it was built within the tower and raised by windlass and tackle, ready in the fall of 1814, though there is nothing in the records to show when it was finished or whether it was formally dedicated. But there is an over-the-center door statement which says, well, even though it was written much later by Leonard Bacon, this house was dedicated to the worship of God and Christ, December 27, 1814. It wasn't called a church, however, until after the separation of church and state under the new state constitution of 1818, and when it came to be referred to as Center Church is not known. Center Church belongs to the golden age of New England architecture. The designers of these churches got their ideas chiefly from the English Georgian style. I may have mentioned this, but when I initially decided to conduct these survey audits, however you would like to phrase that, as I began progressing, I realized that one of the perhaps understated intentions unintended results of this is, at least for me, is the sharp divide between narrative and reality. What I mean by that is, these numbers jump around to the tune of hundreds of properties are not listed on these surveys, but they were recorded. Unless you're taking a survey and you jump from number 34 to 35 to 42 to 43 to 53, unless there's some rationale behind that I don't understand. A lot of these that were culled from the survey, for whichever reason, it's not an all-inclusive survey. And when we look at the older pictures, what is labeled often as Tartarian type style or era building, they're massive, grand, and there's some of that leaks through to the survey. But more importantly to me is the omission. It's hard to highlight things that are not there, but the omission of some of these properties and the inclusion of some very rustic podunk sheds and rotting wood buildings, as long as it can contribute to the narrative of the area. If it can contribute to the industry of an area or to a person, then it's included in the final version. This leads me to believe that even these surveys are conducted rather dishonestly. Sure, there are some representation of these older grand buildings, sure, but many of them are notably missing, or they are lumped in with, say, in a historic district. Won't necessarily be on this survey. Many of the districts, I plan on doing a walkthrough of all these historic districts. You see, I'm in this for the long haul. There's so much to cover that I don't think in a lifetime or two I'll ever get there. But I'm gonna try, and that's why I go through these rather mundane, dare I say, more boring parts of the history in the National Registry, and these black and white pictures that are not grand. They are not clickbait. Click to deterrent, if anything. They're not catchy. They're not trying to wow. The wow factor, I mean, that is the internet in general right now. Right. There's so many things vying for your attention. So many screaming, look at me, click me, watch me, so much of that. And I don't want to play that game. I prefer to be a little bit more subtle, under the radar, and collect the interest of perhaps more of a niche audience. Perhaps more of someone who's particularly interested in their area, or an area of the world, or particularly interested in a particular architectural style. Those that maybe have no idea about the narrative construction. Maybe it hasn't occurred to them that history is to be challenged at every step, or at least reinterpreted. And so that is why, to me, it's worth trudging along through these muddy trenches for the little bits of information, because it's just piling little grains of sand onto what eventually will be a tower of information, of lack of information withholding. How, it all contributes to a collective, to an understanding, a bigger picture. My mind, having gone through so much of this, as many of yours, I'm sure, there's no doubt more. There's no longer any room for doubt. It's not even a matter of if we've been lied to. It's to what extent, and from all angles, and from all, I mean, it seems to be set up this way. But I just wanted to point that out, that this is not, if you're looking for very flashy, if you're looking for like absolutely outstanding, just almost unthinkable designs and intricacies and complex, amazing art, I've got plenty of that, and eventually that will get out in other architecture focus, and that's simply just not these videos, because I'm trying to, rather than sensationalize, I'm trying to do this in a more of a thorough, dare I say, regimented, official sort of way, where we're just simply going through the surveys as they are, seeing what we can see, not looking for what's already obvious, not looking for what we know is there, but looking for what we don't know is there. And to me, that is worth the effort. Now, how to do this without, how to say, it's difficult to express things optimistically about oneself without coming across as arrogant. I don't have an ego about this, but I do know that from time, and from the people around me, have told me that I do have a way, or a natural knack for perhaps making uninteresting things amusing or entertaining. And so, armed with that knowledge, or at least that which has been told me, that character trait that's been assigned to me, I felt like it was the perfect fit for me to go through this information, where to find your niche at in life. If I can take something really as mundane as post offices and bridges from the 1800s and make them mildly interesting or mildly amusing enough just to hold attention, then to me that's a win, and to me that is a good role that I want to fill in this army of truth. As unaffiliated and as unorganized as we may be, we share a common intent, I believe. And one of those intents is to point out every eagle that you find, such as this one here. Venetian logo perched on top of a fast cheese with an arrow inside, allegedly, if the symbols are to be believed. But either way, rather ostentatious for a mere post office, don't you think? This is the Winsted Post Office in Litchfield County on US Route 44. We are told date of erection, according to the granite cornerstone set in the base of the building, 1936. Although the dedication ceremony didn't take place until 1937, Louis Simon was the architect. Or Andrew Rossett. The town clerk's office lists the original owner of the Winsted Post Office to being Thomas Finn, James Finn, George Finn, and Edward Finn. Finn family sold the property to the United States Postal Service on March 18th, 1936. That's interesting. We have a dedication ceremony on May 15th of 1937. But the property, for some reason, although it's constructed in 1936, it's sold to the United States in March 18th of 1936. The builder's unknown, so these Finn family built this building on the land, and then immediately before it was even constructed, sold it to the government. No original plans remain. There is a basement, and until the year 1927, a local debate was conducted in 1927 in the town to decide where to put the official post office. Some residents felt the new building, after it was all said and done, was rather small, virtually unattractive, and didn't have a significant stature, community the residents wanted. Finally, they built this one 10 years later, and it's been operating ever since. Considering it was built during the Depression, when the economy was near collapse, the construction represented a significant local state, reflecting the use of quality building materials and craftsmanship. Example of the 1930 government institutional type building in the tradition of colonial American revival architecture. After all, couldn't go out with this little bit of functionless piece of decor, could you? It should be noted that there was one sweeping staircase which was removed from the 1936 building it was the one that connected to the base. There is a unpictured here, at least here, there's a painted mural on the wall of the lobby, which apparently depicts the town folk disagreement as to where the post office would be built. Kind of funny thing to paint on the on the wall of where you did decide to build one. Anyway, and that was quite a lot of information by Connecticut standards. Compare that to this here Russell House, which is just a 2.5-story wood. The illustrious Illuminati-aligned original family tree Russell. That would be my guess, but I don't know, due to lack of information at the current juncture. This is the waterworks of the Osatonec Water Company, which was part of the Industrial Revolution in New England, which was fueled largely by water power. All the industry growing up along the rivers depended upon, of course, the construction of the dams and the canal. The Housatonic River was the last of New England's major rivers to be harnessed for hydroelectric power. In 1870, the water company used immigration for the irrigation labor force, constructed of solid masonry gravity dam all across this river here, and stretching from the town of Derby to the village of Huntington. Canals that ran down sort of parallel to the river on either side. Now, they're not considered significant landmarks in the history of engineering. Their construction was catalytic in the development of the towns of Derby and Shelton and the industry along the river valley in general. Many industrialists, from what I can tell here, farmers, and local businessmen, legislators were frequently involved in the monitoring of and the conflicts surrounding the development of this dam and these canals. I like the way we build doorways and board them up in this area. Now, from what I can tell, there were copper mills and several factories ran by water power from these canals. In 1822, there was local delegates appointed a committee to hire Benjamin Wright, who would be the chief engineer of the completely impossible Erie Canal, of course, to assess the impossibilities for a canal along this river as well. The purpose was transporting material between Connecticut and Massachusetts, and Lehman Stone of Derby and others filed a petition. They granted a charter for one of these companies to operate in the state. They offered stocks and yada yada. The governor of Massachusetts appointed missions, and all this bureaucracy began laying out the carpets and lubing up the wheels. An attempt was made. At one point, it was defeated by the powerful fishing industry at New Milford, forcing changes in height and location, and the project was supposed to be too expensive. And then the River Railroad arrived in 1840, and the Naugatuck Railroad also arrived in 1849. The incentive to channel this river for transportation became obsolete. But industry still grew, and dams were successfully built, and Derby and Birmingham began to think of this in terms of a power source rather than a source of transportation. Freight. So, again, a group of prominent Derby businessmen began buying up land and organizing a petition to build the dam, and a massive work conducted on a large scale and number of manufacturing facilities, men who owned most of the industries in Derby, including people like Edward Shelton, from whom Shelton was named, founder of the Shelton Company and the first president of the Birmingham National Bank. Also, William Downs, president of the Derby Savings Bank, treasurer of the Derby Silver Company, director of Derby Gas Company, also on the boards of the Birmingham Water Company and the Birmingham National Bank. D.S. Brinsmade, the engineer of the dam, was on the boards of the Birmingham National Bank, the Silver Plate Cutlery Co., and the Plum Memorial Library. Speaking of Plum, David Plum, the first president of the Silver Plate Cutlery Company, the president of Shelton Water Company, and the boards of the Derby Savings Bank and Star Pen Company. Plum Memorial Library was named after him. We also have Dr. John Howe, the founder of the Howe Manufacturing Company, the first company in the U.S. to manufacture pin, P-I-N-S. He was also on the boards of Wilcox and Howe, which made bicycle forgings, and the Derby Savings Bank. You also have the owners of the Pagaset Mills, the Bassetts, who was the president of the Birmingham Iron Foundry, prominent local businessmen, Thomas Burlock, etc., etc. Both the usual who's who of bankers, wheelers, dealers, industry owners, world polluters, child fondlers, and robber barons. Careful plans made for the use of the power. Careful now, with those plans, that is. And yeah, somewhere around 1866, they managed to do this damn thing. Took them about 3.5 years. They celebrated in Derby with the military parade and some speeches by some of the aforementioned fellers, as well as a wizard named Henry Potter, who inscribed the events in detail in a stone, using the magic endowed upon him by the creator. I may have embellished that last bit. The dam's capacity was rather massive. We were talking about 20 feet wide at the base to tapering to end 8 feet wide at the top. These massive abutments that were 30 feet tall, capped with these granite blocks that were 8 feet long. Canals were 60 feet wide and 14 feet deep often. There were brick gatehouses, which we'll get to shortly. All in all, the thing was quite the operation. But all the gates and locks were replaced between the 1955 and 63 and stopped operating in the 70s due to lack of traffic. Some of it was filled in the 50s to make parking lots. And by 1982, there were only two 300-foot-long sections of the canal left open. Amazing, 100 years, make this massive canal, and then you fill it in to put parking lots 100 years later. Now, the significance of the dam did have an effect on the industry, obviously, of Derby and Shelton. Business had expanded, and the fishing industry collapsed. In 13 years, Shelton was metamorphosized from an agricultural, quiet, sleepy community to an industrial one. 12 factories employing 1,000 people. With the exception of the stone factory, all of the buildings were brick. Tack and bolt factories. There was carriage factories, stone factories, Radcliffe Brothers, hosiery, and every single person that was involved in the dam had a factory along the river's edge. The aforementioned who's who. By 1896, there were 25 mills in factory, and all this at the expense of the New Milford fishermen. The fish refused to swim up inside of it. I wonder why. By the turn of the century, the shad fish, what they were primarily fishing, had disappeared from the river altogether. And of course, the state legislature gave the Housatonic Water Power Company a release from the obligation to maintain the fish. So as long as when the railroads connected Derby, the upper canal, the locks were obsolete, and they basically filled it all in, locked it all up. No more canal for you. No more fish either, for that matter. And one wonders if these were good decisions. I mean, I understand job creation and industry, causing a catalytic rise in some of these areas that wouldn't actually normally have that happen to. But is it good for us as a whole? I'm gonna say no. Anytime you're going with less water, more smoke and fire, you're, a little bit less in the elves camp and you're a little bit more on Sauron's side. You know what I'm saying? And let's face it, Mordor is one ugly sumbitchin' place. I don't just mean the land. Have you seen the orc women? Yeesh. I get their calendar every year, their pinup calendar, and it is very undesirable. That actually would be a funny concept, but yeah, I made all that up. This little building is actually a 3-story commercial block, known as the Crown Street Building, which you can tell by its absolutely royal beauty. 1912 Abdul Steinbeck, interesting combination of names there. I got a $15,000 mortgage on the property. Gets a permit for responsibly remodeling the building, we're told. And the building has seen many tenants throughout the years. There were interior renovations in the 70s which left the building structurally unsound. Renovations that left it unsound, and it's been vacant since the 70s. Jesus. Way to protect your cultural heritage, guys. Looks like old Kern's Sandwich Shop is, Dunzo's. Next door, looks like we have, there it is on its little backside. This here is also on Crown Street. This is we're told a successful businessman who shan't be named built 55 Crown Street as a small, speculative business. It's been remodeled a buttload of times. It says here, buttload. Now, little remains of the original building. There were 3 storefronts. 2 of them have been consolidated by the tenant, as you see, Mrs. Murphy's Pub. Andrew G. Smith, the president and treasurer of the New Haven Window Shade Company, bought this in 1920, and it was leased to a restaurant, a highway transportation company, a confectionery, and in 1941 it was foreclosed upon. Would be my guess. Terrible joke. We'll remove that from this tall, strikingly out-of-place building is known as the Dawson and Douglas Building. I'm digging this stretch of information. Unexpected boon. Thank you, Connecticut, for the handout here. This building it first appears in a photograph in 1865. It is isolated clearly. It has the disease. It is apparent that the brownstone facade is of a later date than its missing neighbors. What does that mean? Its style postdates the 1850 purchase by Dawson and Douglas, but shares stylistically details with the Palladium building, which is attributed to Henry Austin. The architect of this one is unknown, which is why they're recklessly speculating the way that I often do. And it's a miracle she's still standing. Dawson and Douglas, well, let's talk about those guys. Who were they? Henry Shepard Dawson was born in New Hartford in 1813. In 1841, he became a clerk in his brother's grocery store. And his nephew, Benjamin Douglas, bought out William H. Dawson and went to the confectionery business at 47 State Street. Got involved in the West India trade with ships going to Puerto Rico and San Domingo. And in 8 years, they went from 1 to 3 vessels, and their business increased from $30,000 to $800,000 per year, which in the 1800s is substantial. Millions and millions. Henry became involved in politics, of course, and served as the first president of the Derby Railroad. There it is. In 1859, he helped to form the New Haven Water Company, becoming its president in 1866.
Activated.
Lower State Street, which is where this is located, we're told was hit hard by urban renewal in the 1960s. However, the 1968 State Street Redevelopment and Renewal Plan, which was supposed to provide for the virtual eradication of the existing 19th century streetscape. Wow. Great stated goal. Large blocks of land and the entire eastern side of the street were slated for acquisition by the city for sale and redevelopment. Even before 1968, we're told buildings were falling. The Mirsic building was torn down in 64, and the paper company building was torn down soon after. The urban renewal program was never realized for State Street, and in its wake were left a wasteland of parking lots and a few surviving commercial buildings. Great job, city. Tear down buildings and build nothing in there instead. I wonder why they would do that. Can you guys think of any reason why?
Stay out of my
completely
psychosis.
eradicate the beautiful 19th century streetscape and put nothing instead? I don't know.
Well,
I
I'm a
find that to
mushroom
be
cloud
very
laying mother-
confirming. Personally. Also very wasteful and very rude. This is the Worcester and Ensign and Son, Worcester A. Ensign and Son, terrible name, hardware store. One of the finest Italian-style commercial buildings in New Haven, we're told. Dominated by the elaborate cornice up here at the top here. Walter Ensign bought this, or Worcester bought this house in 1873. Got a loan for the bank and we're told built this building in 1876. He relocated his hardware store, and 5 years later he was no longer there. Eventually purchased by, the entire street was purchased by Claire B. Gordon, the wife of Myron Gordon of the George Gordon Fruit and Produce Company. And yeah, buying them buildings and this is the Ives Memorial Library. Of course. Why would I think it was a church? The Free Public Library, New Haven's most important example of architecture and design influenced by the City Beautiful movement. Designed by New York fraudster Cass Gilbert, who is the co-author of a visionary New Haven city plan, one of the very few recommendations in the plan to be fully realized. Designed to utilize the Beaux-Arts technique of massing and plan along with materials and detailing drawn from the federal and Georgia tradition. And it is quite the looker. Really is. The whole ball of wax, the whole plaza is just gorgeous. Nestled away here in this absolutely wonderful part of town. Looks like to Mob Ryan. Closed for renovations, no doubt to make it more unsound. Parts of this were demolished during this renovation, we're told. Kind of reminds me of the school I once almost bought and lived in. Are you drinking on the job, John? Well, what's that behind your back? Are you hiding a doobie? Gorgeous building though, look at that entranceway. Mein Gott. The staircase, everything. Give me a break of a library. Come on. This thing's a freaking cathedral. It's amazing. Murals and the size of it alone is just very telling. Winding hallways without end. And really, this library is just a stunner. I'm glad it survived the Great Purge. Look at those columns. Fantastic. This definitely makes up for all those bridges from earlier, Connecticut, alright? And on that note, I'm out of here before it tries to stick me to the bridge again. We'll see you soon.